Let's go ahead and get into a demo. We're going to start by provisioning block storage. To provision block storage, the first thing we need to do is configure iSCSI interfaces. The iSCSI interface is the network port that you're going to access this user data from. That network is going to be an isolated network. You don't want it to be routed in any way, shape, or form. iSCSI should be run only over a non-routed network in order to prevent broadcast storms, issues with routes and routing between networks, and really to keep all of your traffic segregated from the basic SAN traffic that we're going to throw across this particular network. So let's go ahead and click on block on the left-hand side underneath the storage section. You'll notice as the page loads, there are 3 different tabs. The tab that we want to select is the iSCSI Interfaces tab. From the iSCSI Interfaces tab, we're going to see any existing interfaces. In our case, we don't have any displaying at this point in time. So in order to add an iSCSI interface, we want to click the plus sign. We are now presented with an Add iSCSI Network Interface dialog box. From the Ethernet port dropdown, we want to select the ports that we did not use during the initial configuration setup. So we want to go ahead and utilize port 2 first, and we're going to assign an IP address that's specific to our non-routed network, 192.168.65.104. It has a subnet of a class C, so 255.255.255.0, and because this is a non-routed network, we don't need a gateway. You can change your IQN alias if you wish, but it's always recommended to go ahead and leave that at the default that was configured. And then you have the option of changing the VLAN ID. So changing the VLAN ID is really only important if you're presenting multiple networks over a single network interface. So because you might have multiple iSCSI networks for security segregation, or you might have a desire to put a file server on the same network interface as this particular iSCSI network interface, we would set a VLAN ID. So in our case, we're going to go ahead and state yes at this dialog box, which is asking us, are you sure you want to do this? And we're going to set it to 65. In our environment here, we've set our VLAN ID to match the 3rd octet of our IP address. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. That's going to take a moment to apply the changes, and when it's complete, it will refresh and show us the interface in the listing. Now that our interface has been added, we want to go ahead and add a second interface. When you're dealing with EMC iSCSI connected storage arrays, generally you're going to want to create 2 iSCSI networks that are isolated and connect both of those to your host infrastructure that is utilizing the storage. This is for performance and load balance, and as well as redundancy. So we're going to go ahead and add that second interface now. We're going to repeat the process basically like we did before. We're going to click the plus sign. It's going to bring up our dialog box. This time we're going to select Ethernet port 3. The IP address is 192.168.75.104. Same subnet. And then our VLAN ID this time is .75. We click OK to continue. Again, the screen will refresh after applying the changes to the storage array. After you have both of your interfaces ready to go, you can go ahead and click on the LUNs tab. On the LUNs tab, we have the ability to create LUNs, or virtual disks if you will, that will be presented to the hosts that we connect up to this Unity VSA. So we're going to click on the plus sign to add a LUN. The Create a LUN wizard displays. The first thing we want to do is we want to give it a descriptive name that we can apply. Since this is going to be connecting to a server called test05-win, we're going to go ahead and put that as part of the name, and we're also going to put the iteration or the number of the LUN that we've created. This helps us identify the host that this is connected to, as well as if it presents up through the OS of the platform we're connecting, it should also display the name there. And it's just going to make it easier for us to troubleshoot and make changes later without causing impact to the environment. You can also add a description if you wish. We're going to go ahead and click on Next to continue. The Configure Storage Characteristics tab presents us with multiple different options. The first thing we need to do is select the pool that we're going to pull this storage from. So we click on that and we are presented with a select a pool screen. In our case, we only have a single pool. It's called Storage Pool 1, and it's a capacity tier. So we're going to select it and then click the Select Pool button. Then we have a tiering policy. A tiering policy is a policy that if you've got multiple disk types in that environment or in that storage pool, it's going to decide where to place the data initially. So our tiering policy in this case is start high, then auto tier. So you always want it to land on the highest disk, highest performance disk, and then move throughout the rest of the tiers as the storage array sees fit. Then from a sizing standpoint, we're only going to create a 10 gigabyte LUN. It is going to be thin, and then we are not going to impart any type of host IO limit to this particular LUN. We're going to click Next to see our access options. What I like to do, from my personal experience, is I like to create the LUNs first. And then after I've created the LUNs, I'll come back and I'll add access to those LUNs. By adding access, we're saying this machine is going to go ahead and connect to this particular LUN. So that makes it so it's a secure connection, no other host can get to it, and no other users can see that data. At this point in time, we're not going to add a host because we don't have any to attach to this particular LUN. So we're going to click Next to continue. Configure snapshot scheduling. So a snapshot is basically a point in time of your particular LUN. A lot of times it's used for test dev, or if you're doing file storage, things like that, you'll use that snapshot and you'll be able to do restore back to it, or you're able to mount it up as another LUN and attach to a different host altogether. In our case, we're not going to select any type of snapshot schedule because it's not applicable to our needs. Let's click Next to continue. The replication screen gives you multiple different options. So we're going to enable the replication just so we can see what our options are. Our replication mode, we have asynchronous and manual. That just means how do we want this replication to happen? Asynchronous means near real time or as close to real time as we can get. The RPO is basically how much data are you willing to lose? So how much of a lag between the fresh data and the replicated data can there be? In this case, we've got it at 60 minutes. And we're going to replicate to another location. Because we don't have another destination, we only have local. And in our case, our environment isn't set up for replication, so we're going to disable this option at this point in time. Click Next. We are presented with a summary. In the summary, we can again validate anything that we have selected throughout our wizard. And finally, we're going to click Finish. After we click Finish, it's going to go out and create the LUN that we requested, with the access, the size, the capacity, and the name that we've specified. And when it's complete, we'll be able to click Close to move on. Depending on multiple factors, the creation of this LUN may take a little bit of time or a lot of time. Size, speed of your infrastructure, and so on are going to affect the results. But when it is finished, we can go ahead and click Close. And we'll see that our LUN is listed here, and it's got information about that LUN on the right-hand side. You'll notice the capacity bar that goes horizontal shows us what was created, but then it'll also show what's been allocated within that individual LUN, giving us a better idea of usage because of the fact that this LUN was created thin. In order to attach a host, you would go into your host that you're going to connect with, and for the case of this particular module, we cannot go into each and every type of host that might connect up to a SAN. So we're going to talk about the generalities of using your operating system's iSCSI configuration. You'll connect with both IPs that we set up in the iSCSI Interfaces tab. We should see this LUN once we've added the access to that host, and you'll be able to basically format that disk and use it just like you would any other disk that you've attached to your operating system. You can keep adding LUNs to your Unity VSA until you've hit the limit that's been imposed by the platform itself. Read the documentation for any updated or new limits as additional releases get made to update the functionality of your Unity VSA.